Hello and welcome to today's webinar, From Data to Defense, How Governance and AI Advance Compliance and Security. Today's presentation is brought to you jointly by NeoSystems and Microsoft. I'm Don Carnevale, Marketing Director at NeoSystems, and I'll be the host for today's event. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can enter them into the Q&A area within Zoom. We will have some time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. Also, we will make the webinar recording and presentation slides available to all registrants in the coming days. Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll talk about the basics of data governance, benefits and impact for all companies, both large and small, how it relates to security, compliance, and artificial intelligence. We'll talk about establishing a data governance program and how the impact and contributions of AI impact data governance. And then we'll also talk about how companies can effectively leverage AI for better data governance. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our featured speakers. Samantha Marsh is a principal fast track architect at Microsoft. Also joining us is Richie Wallace, principal program manager at Microsoft. Now let's get started. Samantha, we'll start with you. Before we dig into the conversation on AI, compliance, and security, let's start with the basics. What do we mean when we say data governance, and why is that so important?
Yeah, thank you so much, Don. Great to see everybody, speak with everybody today. So data governance, right? What is it? Why is it important? I think we can look at this as from a basics perspective of federal policy really defines data governance as the process of setting and enforcing priorities for managing data as a strategic asset in service of an agency's mission, right? And so for me, when I think about that and what it means, it's really about making sure that we're taking into account all things like integrity, accuracy, protections, making sure that we understand sensitive information. Is the data accessible? Is it accessible by the right people? And then ensuring all up, really, what is the compliance that drives us? What types of legal obligations are we meant to follow? And all of this is going to boil down to ensuring that our data quality, our accountability to that data, security, compliance wrapped around that data leads us to things like efficiency and effectiveness, data being available to those that need it when they need it, and that it can be used as a mechanism going forward in the day-to-day operations of things. So the importance of the data governance itself is really to define that framework, that wrapper, if you will, that enables data to become that asset, that living thing that enables us as we move forward. Richie, any thoughts from you on the importance of data governance and what it is?
Yeah, those important things, like you mentioned, that it's all about ensuring your data is secure, and you have policies that surround that data to ensure that the proper usage of the data is followed. It's also about, once you have the data there, make sure it's actually available to your user base, because once you have a governance policy around that data, you want to make it accessible to users to be able to make sure they not only follow the policy, but they have access to that data as well. But that's pretty much it.
All right, excellent. So now that we've established that, what do you see as the benefits and impact of data governance, both for enterprise level organizations as well as for smaller businesses?
I think for me, it's about consistency and accuracy of information, right? So the benefits of having good data governance means that I can leverage that data as a mechanism to make decisions, to enforce my operational, as I mentioned, efficiency and effectiveness. I think about it in terms of how do I enable business intelligence, making sure that I have structure around my data. And as we look at this thing, Gen AI, and how we're going to move forward, it becomes critical for that structure to be in place. Well-governed data can lead to more accurate responses from AI. It can ensure that the responses are meeting those guiding principles of being fair and compliant and transparent, because, well, good data equals a good response, right? I also think that some of the benefits and impacts that data governance has, as I mentioned, about efficiency and effectiveness, right? Having some standardizations that carry across multiple departments so that everybody is operating in more of a seamless fashion is going to be an ideal state, rather than one department does things one way, another department does things a different way. Maybe it doesn't all align. Your policies get possibly creating some confusion. What can I do? What can't I do, et cetera. I also think having these frameworks really, to reiterate on what Richie was saying, helps us to establish some strict principles, if you will. Data privacy, data security, proper use, access controls, right? The idea in the end is that we want to make sure that we're mitigating risk, we're ensuring compliance, we're not oversharing, we're protecting, whether it's internally or externally, depending on the type of data that we deal with. So I think that there are a lot of benefits that come from having that governance structure in place. And the reverse of not having it is that impact, right? The risk level goes up. You could have brand impacts. You could have a number of different negative connotations that come out of not having the proper governance in place.
I just want to come off mute and just kind of expand on what Sathan was referring to. It's all about having the data to make your decisions much better, much easier. What I mean by that is if you have a governance policy, or you can trust that data, you can trust the data users find and discover within your own environment. It also really does improve and increase efficiency because it makes sure your data is accurate. That saves a lot of time. Your users can trust that data and make it accessible to them, which then saves them time by having to go back and double check and making sure that that data is actually accurate. Just across the board, in summary, it's all about making sure you have your data governed so it's accessible. It makes overall your entire organization more efficient, and it actually will reduce your ROI across the board as you have that governance around your data, and it will reduce your overall risk by ensuring that data is accurate across the board.
Yeah, Don, real quick, you also mentioned, what is the benefit and impact, whether it's an enterprise or a small business? And to kind of touch back on that a little bit, I don't think it really matters about the size of the organization, right? So we all live and breathe by data. It drives our decision making. It drives how we look at things. It drives how look at today's conversation, right? So there's data that is driving this conversation, if you will. So for me personally, I kind of look at it as I don't really take into consideration how large or how small. It's about setting the right controls. It's easier to set it earlier in the process rather than after the fact. But I think we all have to approach some level of governance within our organizations, regardless of size. For me, it's important that that gets established to protect our our investment, right? Our organizations are naturally by default a type of an investment for somebody somewhere. And if data is going to be one of those driving components, then we need to protect it. So small, medium, large, extra large, doesn't really matter. The data governance needs to be in play.
Great, thank you for that. That's great insight on that. Okay, so next question I had is, now that we've really got a good foundation for data governance, what do you both see as the kind of the impact as well as the contribution of AI when it comes to some of these data governance challenges?
Yeah, so Don, it's kind of funny. So Richie and I both get the great opportunity of supporting customers in different industries, both government and commercial, around the use of AI in their environments. And I think the number one thing that we've seen as far as the contribution to data governance that AI has had is highlighting to customers and organizations where maybe they failed to actually put in necessary controls, right? And it's uncovering where companies fail to implement some of those foundational elements that are necessary for good data governance, right? I think AI has amplified some of the data governance complexities that require us to think differently. And there is this notion of cleanup that is very prevalent, not just for the customers that we deal with day in and day out, but based on various articles that get written and some of the things that you read in the newspapers or the news. I don't know how many people read newspapers these days. But it becomes this notion of cleanup as a primary response to the introduction of AI, ensuring that data security is in place before AI becomes prevalent in an organization. And so what's happening is the big contribution is, one, we're cleaning up something that notoriously has been ignored. And two, we're becoming proactive stewards, right? Instead of reactive taskmasters when it comes to data. We're thinking about it in terms of its longevity. We're thinking about it in terms of good data versus bad data. How is that data then going to be translated into long-term used data? And so I think that when you apply some of the AI principles as those guiding factors and work them into the overall data governance strategy at an organization, you start to uncover how you can do things better. Retention policies come to mind. I recently worked with a customer that they have no retention policies. And so the same document was free-form living with 15 different versions. And well, when you load all 15 versions into AI, what happens? It's not really sure which one it should believe as the source of truth, right? It's got 15 different versions to choose from. So it's uncovering a lot of those things that many organizations have overlooked or swept under a rug, if you will, for a period of time. I think that beyond that, the challenges that it does pose is reviewing that data takes time. It's not an overnight solution. There's no easy button to fix it. And therefore, it might take a little bit of time, which can slow the progress, right? That forward motion, if you will. So organizations have to kind of find some sort of a balance by leveraging tools at their fingertips in order to assist them with what kind of data do I allow versus don't allow? What capabilities do I have to lock some things down sooner rather than later? What types of reports are at my fingertips through the tooling that I have to say uncover where I might have a negative impact or need to mitigate the risk, right, if you will. I think those are the big ones that really come to mind today. And again, you see the good and the bad, and they kind of play off of each other, right? So the idea is now, how do you find that middle ground so that innovation continues within an organization? Richie, anything to add?
Yeah, so as Samantha said, we've had a lot of experience with customers that play in areas that are basically government-based customers, and many of those customers have, moved over data that wasn't necessarily as secure as it possibly could be. So as things like AI come into the mix, it then kind of shines that spotlight on that content, on that data. I always reemphasize to all my customers that Copilot doesn't expose you to any, AI doesn't expose you to any risks at all. It's more around AI can help you find that data a little bit easier. That data is already in your environment. It's already accessible. And AI just comes in and can help you discover that content. So using a data governance model and going back through and ensuring that data is secure will ensure your AI implementation is fully used and fully secure and protected across the entire environment. That's one thing that AI has provided a huge contribution, is to introduce the ability to find this data easier, to secure it, keep it secure, to keep tabs on it, auditing, compliance. All those things can be pushed down using AI to ensure that your data governance policies are in check, and everything's properly regulated across the board.
All right, great insight. Great insight. Thank you. So, next question is, how would you see are ways that companies can really effectively leverage AI for data governance? So you talked about the importance, the contributions, the impact, but what are some more specific ways maybe that companies can leverage AI for data governance?
Yeah. So for us personally, within the space of Microsoft, right? So we have this thing called Copilot, and its intention is that it's AI powered. It can act as an assistant in two different manners. One is to help you as you're doing browsing on the web, right? Correlates that information a little bit differently. It's can be leveraged as an assistant because it has access to enhanced information from the back-end graph, if you will. And so I think, as we were talking on the previous question, really the way that AI is leveraging and supporting data governance in this case is that back-end graph is all supported based on the data governance and the controls that have been put in place. Do I have access to the data? Is the data considered sensitive? Has it been labeled as such? If Copilot and or AI, depending on the tool, has access to that information, it should inherently take on the controls and only present me with information that is available to me, right? Because I've been granted that access. On the flip side, I think a great example that I have of where AI helped a customer, it literally, by putting the use of Copilot in play, allowing a small test group or pilot group, if you will, to kind of dip their toes in the water a little bit, test it out. They uncovered that they didn't have proper security in place. They had a very flat organization when it came to their permissions. And a few people were able to uncover information that maybe they shouldn't have had access to, right? So it gave them the ability to lock that down, remove the permissions, and begin some of their cleanup. With the back-end reporting capabilities depending on the type of environment you're in. Commercial is going to have a little bit different capability than from, say, a government-related tenant. So we have to keep that in mind as well. But really making sure that you have those permissions of all your existing compliance, making sure that your data is classified properly, applying data loss prevention policies, right? Having a sensitivity label of confidential, but not actually doing anything with it other than putting a label on it. That's not really a control. It's a reactive measure where you run a report to see what somebody is doing with it versus having the necessary policy that says if this is highly confidential, it can't be downloaded. Maybe it's accessible, but nobody's downloading it. Nobody's, going to print it off, things of that nature. That's the avenue that you want to get to. And I think that AI is helping customers to kind of unravel some of these things that haven't been as prevalent in the past, and making them take a secondary look at it. A lot of times folks will look at data governance and go, oh, it's a one-time setup and you leave it and forget it. And what AI is doing is it's saying, no, now you set it up and then you monitor for it. So again, becoming that proactive steward for data governance, for data management as a whole. I think the other thing that it's doing is getting organizations to look at data differently, because good data is going to result in good responses through that LLM, right? So as it's learning and it's taking that large language model, is taking all of that ingestion of data, and then providing those responses, folks are realizing that, hey, I better have some good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out, really is what it comes down to. So back to the 15 document versions of information, right? So if you have a vacation policy as an example, and that vacation policy has morphed over time, and you've got too many different versions, well, if somebody were to ask, hey, what is our current vacation policy? It might not come back with the right response because it's having to resonate over 15 different versions. So making sure that you're enabling AI to have a better output really comes from having the good data to start. So I think that people are leveraging AI in two ways. There are some automated capabilities, there are some manual capabilities, depending on the type of environment that you're working within. There are limitations that get found, right, as it relates to some of the inner workings of the tooling and the integrations to the tooling as well, that is allowing organizations to look beyond their current scope of capabilities. And then ultimately, right, it's really about getting us to a better state, which I think is how this is being viewed. Richie?
Yeah, absolutely. The one area that I wanted to kind of touch on, and this is key for me and kind of top of mind, because I just had this discussion with a customer actually yesterday, and it just resonates with this question. How do you leverage AI to kind of enforce data governance? And it's all around predictive analytics, and it's also around anomaly detection and a data lineage tracking. So what I mean by that is having systems in place that can actually look across your environment from a security standpoint, looking for any kind of breaches, and take take actually action on those breaches, learn from those breaches, analyze your environment, and then also track it. It's called data lineage. Actually, it tracks that data from where it's sourced from and where it goes through your environment. So you actually can track it through the environment, ensuring that that data stays in your environment. So Those three things are very key with AI, is making sure that your environment is fully secure, and then be able to use AI to grow and learn and actually be predictive across the board, and then tracking that data and when it's internally and where it's gone and whether it ever leaves your environment as well.
Yeah, I think Don, to kind of tack on to what Richie is saying a little bit too, right? So if we think about leveraging AI for data governance from the sheer fact of how do we control it, that tooling for the data lineage behind the scenes, right? What is the capability there? If I were to take this to the next level of introducing Copilot as an example, there's security Copilot, right? There are purview capabilities. There are additional insider risk management types of capabilities. There's additional risk-based conditional access. So now you're taking it beyond just the scope of data governance and getting into security controls that align more towards identity. And I think Richie will, back me on this. One of the first things that we recommend to folks is before you get into the DLP policies and the sensitivity labels, first and foremost, it comes down to access, because these AI systems are only going to be accessing data that is available to the individual that is leveraging it. Now, whether you're sharing it through a graph by using Copilot or uploading the information into a ChatGPT type of situation or uploading the file, the key here is I had access to that information in order to share it with AI. So that's where we really have to start, right? And I think that's where AI is helping to really set the stage for that foundational data governance strategy at an organization that maybe hasn't set one in quite some time.
Excellent. That's such great insight on how to leverage it better. So that will do it for our presentation for today. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some time now for questions. So if you do have a question for Samantha or Richie, please go ahead and enter those in the Q&A area here within the Zoom window. We'll pause for just a few moments here to allow you to enter those questions in. And then once they do, we can pose those to our experts and get some answers for you. So we did have one question that has been put in the Q&A area. The first one is, I'll ask this and you let me know if you're able to answer it. How is AI going to interact with CMMC specifically?
Richie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So you actually can use AI tools looking for certain. So as you know, with CMMC, there's 3 different levels within CMMC, and there are different things you have to follow. Anywhere from I think level 1 is 15, level 2 is 120 something, and level 3 is 100. Basically, it's different policies you have to actually follow. So you can use AI looking for things, a way to clean up your data, making sure your content is properly labeled, looking for CUI, those types of things to make sure that your data is secure and you're following CMMC. I have not seen an AI model that's built just off CMMC that actually looks at CMMC across the board and looks for all your data, looks to make sure everything lines up. But if you're in this world, you're doing CMMC, it's all around CUI, making sure that your content's labeled properly, and AI can do all that with Purview, and with AI, you actually can go through and make sure you're meeting all your CMMC regulation policies. So, do you have anything you want to comment on that besides what I said?
No, I don't think so. I think you kind of covered that one off pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, this is my world. I live in this world quite a bit. I'm actually the CNNC lead for federal, so I can answer a lot more than just that.
Great. Next question is, how do you assess risk within your system if you are introducing AI components?
So I'll take a stab at this one. And again, I think this kind of comes back to if you're where does your data, if we're taking it into consideration from where does your data live, right? So I think there's a security risk where you would do an assessment of your current security structure. How many security groups do you have? What accesses do they have? What do they have access to? Who's using them? Have you done your own necessary cleanup for, say, movers, leavers, joiners, right? Type of situation. So that would be one aspect. I think from a compliance type of risk, right? You really have to take into consideration what drives you. So what are your compliance regulations and how are you monitoring for those today? If you're not, then obviously that is something that you would have to possibly look into further. In the commercial space specifically, we're going to have tools that help you, right? So there are different types of reports that will help you to uncover, has your data been shared outward? There's going to be, auditing reports that you could leverage to help you understand what's being done in your environment today. And that's really what this comes down to, is understanding your environment, and then mapping the current constructs of your controls back to, have you built the control? Is anybody monitoring for the control, right? I think that's a common issue that we see as well, that people, again, they set it and forget it, right? And so nobody's going back, or there's alerts that have been ignored, that sort of thing. And now becomes that opportunity to reinvest some time to taking a look at those types of scenarios and then building the necessary controls around it. Did you want to add anything on that one?
Yeah, actually I do, because I'm working an active engagement with a very large customer right now, and this is a very hot topic with them, and it's all about making sure that you're conducting regular privacy and security reviews across your entire environment. So making sure your data is fully secure, make sure your data is labeled properly, and taking action on those types of things. And also, when you talk about your data itself, there's around 9 to 15 questions you should be able to answer on your data and how it's properly secured before you implement AI. And you can do that with any third-party tool. Internally at us, of course, we're using Purview for labeling and making sure the CUI, making sure that labels are set properly across your environment. But there are third-party tools that do similar things. But if you can't answer those questions around data security and how you're protecting your data, you need to make sure you do that first before you implement any kind of AI, because AI is going to find those things a little bit easier. So making sure you have privacy and security reviews, and then making sure you know overall how you're going to use AI in the environment. And since I have a hot mic, I'll go ahead and answer the next question. So that is actually one of my spaces. So integration of Copilot into GCC High. As it stands today, the roadmap item it's set for October of this year. So October is the official release of Copilot and GCC High, and I say that with a caveat of all dates are subject to change. It could go left, it could go right. But as it stands today, Copilot and GCC High should be released in October. And what we do, Samantha and I do with our customers, is all around Copilot readiness, making sure you're ready for Copilot. So I have numerous customers that are in that cloud today, and it gives me a sense of relief to know that I have time to get them ready for Copilot. And that comes back to what I just met, the privacy and security reviews, making sure that Purview is in place, make sure the data is secure properly, make sure SharePoint is locked down, make sure you put in SharePoint Advanced Management, those types of tools to make sure your data is kept secure, and it remains inside your environment, and you actually are tracking it properly.
All right, the next question, I'm going to modify this slightly because I think there's an underlying question, which is, uh, can, and if so, how can AI identify controlled unclassified information?
I can take that one as well. So you can use AI to discover that content. There are different ways to do that. Of course, when you're looking for social security numbers, that's pretty easy. I'm going to reflect back to, because Samantha and I work for Microsoft, so we use Purview quite a bit. That is where we actually ensure that data is secure. So we have trainable classifiers to be able to go out and look at your environment based on criteria you give to look for those things, like social security numbers or birth dates or whatever. We'll go out and actually discover that content, and then you can apply your label. So Purview helps there to not only label it, but also find that data, because you can't label anything you can't find. So it's important to go through and run those commands, run through your system, and make sure you label everything properly. Because, like we've said a couple times during the seminar, that data is going to be accessible and be discoverable with or without Copilot, or sorry, with AI. I keep saying Copilot because that's the world we live in. Copilot or AI, it'll be discoverable with or without that. So ensure your data is properly labeled and secure before you implement AI into your environment.
Okay, the next question is, what is the responsibility, if any, of AI if your data is breached?
So I think this is kind of a dangerous question in my opinion, right? Because um, AI is too broad and general of a term. So you have AI solutions such as Copilot, ChatGPT, Genesis. I can tell you there are AI solutions that are being built for a couple of law firms that I support. They're building their own, right? And so I don't think I have a direct answer for that. Indirectly, what I would say is that the whole reason behind having this conversation around data governance is making sure that you're protecting your data from the individuals who are leveraging the AI solutions. One of the things that comes into play quite frequently when I'm having conversations with customers is, well, I've got this data and I want to make sure that the Purview label that gets set is going to carry forward, right? Well, it has an opportunity to carry forward, such as making it to where the data can't be shared, that sort of thing. But if I, as an individual, have been granted access to that information and I upload it to AI, within the constructs of Copilot, that stays within the boundaries of your Microsoft ecosystem, right? It doesn't train the LLMs. I can't say the same thing if you're leveraging ChatGPT, right? I can't say the same thing if you're not protecting that document and it gets uploaded into, say, Genesis or some other third-party solution, or if somebody copies and pastes that information into a third-party tool, because I don't work within those constructs. But I think that's why we put so much emphasis when we deal with customers today that are looking at what is going to be the big difference between some of these tools. In-house is a little bit easier, which I think there's another question similar in nature further down. Obviously in-house is going to be easier because the tooling is integrated. They're leveraging and feeding off of one another. Whereas the minute you go outside those boundaries, right, it's about making sure that you're looking for risky users. Are they downloading lots of data? Are they have you blocked the use of, say, USB, right? And being able to do external storage in your environment. Some of these things become top of mind. The big one that I'm seeing right now for a lot of customers is, where can I access the data from? They're blocking it from being accessed on any machine, any device without some sort of additional authentication, right? So I think there's a lot that goes into play, but I don't think that I could outright say that any one entity is responsible in the event of a breach, because I just don't know. I think the next question is going to be for you, Don.
Yeah, we are addressing that one.
Okay.
So we'll get to the next question here. So here's another question. How do you protect AI from creating a security breach for confidential information?
You skipped over the last one, Don.
Oh, yeah, there's one before that, I think.
Yeah, it was about the investments that Microsoft is making in Africa. I'm not 100% up on that. I just know that so I'm in the office today and I walk to the break room. And when I walk to the break room, there's a big TV there that's been playing things. And I know one of the things that they've been touching on is we invested, I think, 1.3. I'm trying to remember the display in the break room, 1.3 billion in AI development across Africa today. So we're actually that's AI training, that's AI implementation across all of Africa. So I know that's something we're investing a lot of money, a lot of time in. I don't have all the specifics on that, but it's all about making sure that the infrastructure is there, making sure that training is there, making sure that startups are well versed in the overall product and technology. But past that, I don't have any additional information on that, unless you do, Samantha.
I do not. And honestly, it's going to be whatever is published in the news, if you will. That would be the recommendation. Actually, there is a nice link. Can I go back to that question? Let me add a link in here. I'm just going to type this answer. There is a nice article, a blog article from Microsoft. So I'll put that out there against that question.
All right, great, thank you. So the previous question I had mentioned, how do you protect AI from creating a security breach for confidential information?
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, is it's really going to be dependent upon you making sure that your data is accessible only to those who should have it, and that you're protecting said data with the necessary controls to meet compliance. In addition to that, Microsoft specifically, I can't speak for the other. I think, again, we go back to this concept of AI as kind of a broad term. Um, you know, and they're not all created equal. Okay, so when you take that into consideration, internally to Microsoft for Copilot, part of it is we don't use your data to train the LLMs, right? So we're not ingesting your data into that LLM training. It's going to make a huge difference as far as your data getting out, if you will, right? I also think that when you take into consideration how AI inside of Microsoft's tools is being used, it's intended to be an assistant to you, right? So there are principles that you as an individual should be following, right? If you look at it and it's got a header that says, you know, bonus structure, and it's not public knowledge, then maybe you shouldn't be sharing it. There's a human responsibility that goes with this as well, okay? I think this is the difference between how we approach this now, and if you've seen the, you know, all of the cyborg movies over the years, right? And how AI runs away with itself, and you end up with iRobot or the Matrix or the Terminator, right? Again, it's all about making sure that we operate as ethical stewards and leverage the data for good rather than for malice.
Richie, there's another question here that I think is maybe right up your alley, which is what if any are the current CMMC controls for using AI in a level 2 environment? I have not seen any in the Rev 2 version.
Yeah, so I see that one, and there was one before that one as well. I can address both of those, but as far as the first one, I've actually seen a document. I have to maybe find there actually is an updated document that came out around governing and AI within the environment for CMMC. It's not um, really overly detailed, but it does start calling it out. So it is being discussed. So I'll try to find that link and try to share it here. If not, then is there a way to share it after I find it, not after this webinar?
Yeah, if you want to send it to us after, Richie, we're going to follow up with everyone who registered, and we can include that in that
Awesome.
communication.
So short answer is yes. I'll have to go back and find the actual information on it. As far as the next question, I agree with that, and that's where it comes back to trainable classifier. So I work with a lot of DIBs. I work with DoD is pretty much my main customer base. So I do a lot of this, and so because it's not just about CUI, it's not just about PII, it's also about scientific data and other things. So we have to be able to use trainable classifiers to actually find that data and label it appropriately. So labeling is your answer, but you need to take more of a custom labeling tact in order to get it done correctly, because there's a lot of content that has to be labeled that won't be labeled based on the default labeling policy. So you have to actually do some customization to make sure the data within those environments is discoverable and then labeled appropriately.
All right, and that looks like our last question. So we are going to conclude today's webinar. First off, I want to thank Samantha and Richie so much for participating today, sharing your great insights on data governance, AI, and all these relevant topics. It's been great, very insightful. I learned a lot. So if I learned a lot, then hopefully our audience did as well. On the screen, you can see contact information for all three of us. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions on the material you heard today, um, services that Microsoft or NeoSystem provide, or anything else. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we will be following up in the next day or two with the link to the webinar recording and the presentation slides. So we'll provide that to you. So please keep an eye out for that. If anyone, again, thanks everyone here for attending. Again, Samantha, Richie, thanks very much for your participation today.